The Toronto Raptors have a massive offseason ahead of them, and free agency is going to play a big part into constructing this roster that was completely overhauled ahead of this year's trade deadline. In this video, we're going to break down 3 Raptors free agent targets that have been revealed from the Toronto Star as potential good fits for this Raptors group, and frankly, especially one of them I am in big time agreement with. It's a name I've been sounding out. He's in the thumbnail, Tyus Jones. I've been calling for a bunch on this podcast in recent years. But before we dive into 3 free agent targets, folks, again, the offseason is going to be crazy. So to make sure, if you're a part of the 51% that haven't subscribed just yet, hit that subscribe button because we're going to keep you up to date with all of the latest Toronto Raptors news. But let's dive into the targets. And the first name on this list, coming from, and you can take a look, is Obi Toppin. And basically, Obi Toppin is a guy that really had a disappointing start to his career, obviously getting drafted by the New York Knicks as a lottery pick. People expected to come in, get some buckets out of college. He was a scorer. Was regarded as one of those win now sort of draft selections, and definitely wasn't bad, but now ended up getting traded to the Indiana Pacers last season, and he's 26 years old, just turned 26, usually 25 before, but this year I don't want to say have a breakout year for the Pacers, but had a really solid season for Indiana, averaging 10 points per game, 4 rebounds, 1.6 assists, but what really took a jump and made his game more impressive is the shooting. And you're looking at the splits, he shot 40% from behind the three-point line on 3 attempts per game. He was able to be a big floor spacing big man. He can score kind of all over the court in terms of the mid-range, 3-point range, finish around the basket. He's a solid defender, really strong athlete in regards to dunking the basketball. He's been in dunk contests and things like that. But the shooting has just been awesome for him. I mean, from corners, again, similar percentages, shooting 36% of his shots from the corner, so a lot of them are above the break, still hitting 40% of those shots, and is just kind of elite, knocking down those buckets, right? 43% of his shots did become from behind the three-point line, a lot of them close to mid-range and, around the basket. So this season, they really adjusted his game in terms of where he was getting his looks, where he was getting his shots, and, the Toronto Raptors need shooting. That's just the reality of the construction of the roster with RJ Barrett on this team, with Scotty Barnes, being our 2 sort of lead wing players. Both those guys have improved as jump shooters, but aren't regarded as, natural born pure jump shooters, right? Not your, Klay Thompsons of the world coming in on the wings for this team. More so, primary facet of their game is slashing and secondary is shooting the basketball. So having as many guys out there on the court to be able to space out the court are also, solid finishers around the rim, can play defense. Those are exactly the type of players that Masai Ujiri will probably want to bring in to this Toronto Raptors group going forward to the future. Now, he is a restricted free agent for the Indiana Pacers, but they just traded for Pascal Siakam. They have a lot of guys in that front line, which I don't want to say makes Obi Toppin redundant by any means, but definitely lessens the need for them to match maybe a significant offer for him out there in free agency this summer. And, they have Jalen Smith, they have Miles Turner, they have Pascal Siakam, they have all these dudes in the front court. Bennedict Mathurin will be coming back next season. I mean, I don't think there's a massive need for him there in Indiana, but it is harder to pry away with restricted free agents. Maybe they want to keep him and then maybe trade him or stuff along those lines. But Obi Toppin, I think, would be a cool fit for this Raptors group, especially if we do end up losing Chris Boucher, who is under contract for next season, but maybe is expected to get traded away at this point. I mean, he was essentially benched from this team for a large chunk of this year. Doesn't really fit the Darko Rajovic system, even though, Obi Toppin is younger, but plays a similar game to Chris Boucher, at least in my opinion. A little bit different, looking styles, but I don't know. Obi Toppin would be cool, but the name on this list that has me most encouraged, most intrigued by, it's Tyus Jones. And I've been out here on these podcasts talking about how I want Tyus Jones to be a Toronto Raptor for years. And his stats don't overwhelm anyone. He's a 27-year-old point guard, will be turning 28, averaging 12 points per game, 7 assists this year, for the Washington Wizards, but is just one of the most steady point guards in the entire NBA. And I know the Wizards were bad last year. I know, Tyus Jones wasn't able to turn things around. He's not a bona fide superstar by any means, but he is a dude that just constantly has won games, especially when he was down there with the Memphis Grizzlies. And again, the three-point shooting is just, took another level up last season on 4 attempts per game, shooting 41%, but makes them from pretty well all over the court. As a spot-up shooter, he made 47% of his corner threes last season, and can just be a steady sort of backup point guard for this Raptors group to play behind in Emmanuel Quickley. And that's exactly the type of player that the Toronto Raptors would probably want, especially after giving the reins to a younger point guard. Tyus Jones could come in, if IQ's out, be a starting caliber point guard in the NBA, and just come in, win games, be a steady presence for a young group while also not being old and washed himself. Tyus Jones is just one of those steady facilitators, a solid hound on the defensive end, and when Ja Morant was out for those Memphis Grizzlies teams, Tyus Jones leveled up and showed that he was a legit, starting caliber point guard in the NBA. And even though it didn't translate to wins for the Washington Wizards, it's just a guy that I think, as a free agent, would be a player I'd be comfortable giving a significant contract to be the backup point guard for this Toronto Raptors team. It's just, you need these sort of steady players, especially when you have a young sort of growing team that could potentially take a leap next season. Obviously, I don't expect us to be, a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference by any means, but with the talent of what RJ Barrett showed last year, obviously Scottie Barnes becoming an all-star, and then Emmanuel Quickley potentially taking another jump, maybe Grady Dick, maybe some of these guys really coming into their own, and obviously Jakob Poeltl and Kelly Olynyk being in that front court. I don't think this Raptors team is going to be that bad, and especially if we have players that sort of well around the roster can step in, can be, elite role players. Tyus Jones fits that bill perfectly, and is frankly a guy that I think should be the Toronto Raptors, obviously outside of the big names, the big swings that we maybe could potentially land, but Tyus Jones should probably be on the front of Masai Ujiri's list in terms of offseason realistic acquisitions, because I think he would be an awesome sort of pull for the Toronto Raptors out there in the free agency market. But the last name is probably the most gettable guy out there in the open market free agency, and that's Kris Dunn, who is a guy averaged 5, 3, and 4 last season, is 30 years old, which is crazy to say because I remember him being compared to Dwayne Wade in those drafts a couple of years ago, a while ago. But he came out, not this season, but the season prior, was really good for a Utah Jazz team that didn't have a lot of direction there at that point, but averaged 13 points per game, 5 assists, 4 rebounds. This season, didn't put up those numbers whatsoever. Obviously, his minutes took a little bit of a dip, but 5 points per game, 3 rebounds, 4 assists for Kris Dunn this year. The three-point shooting has always been a big question mark about his game, and it's the reason why he wasn't able to sort of take his game to the next level, take that sort of monumental leap. But the one thing about Kris Dunn is he is an elite defender. He is a guy that can really lock down on the defensive end, even on some rough defensive squads. Kris Dunn has always had the advanced stats that really like him as a defender. His defensive box plus minus is just really solid, and it makes him a positive out there on the basketball court. So even for his shortcomings, shooting the basketball, putting the ball in the hoop, he can kind of facilitate, but he can be out there and just be a hound defensively for whatever team. So if you miss out on a Tyus Jones, the backup point guard position is something the Raptors will need to figure out going into next season. And Kris Dunn, I don't think I'd be super elated and super hyped, if he were to be brought in, but I wouldn't be disappointed. It'd be better than sort of some of the options we've been running in recent years. But let me know what you guys think about all this in the comment section down below. You guys are the best making this far. Make sure you subscribe to Raptors Digest. It means the world to me. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.